Hey lovelies, I wanted to do a video on dopamine. I was talking about smart recovery tools that I was going to share, and I kind of wanted to start with talking about Dr. Amen and some of his research. I absolutely adore him. So this is yerba mate. I like the guayaki. I have it as a dried herb. It's really great for focus and concentration and memory and energy. It is caffeinated, and I'm not a coffee drinker. Sometimes I drink coffee. Like I'll get kind of like a hankering for it, or there is studies that when you're fasting, coffee can actually increase autophagy and bring you deeper into a fasting state. But my body does not like coffee. My heart does not like coffee at all. So this is the stuff. It does come in different flavors. On occasion I'll have the mint, but I'm going to be honest with you, because this is the unsweetened. It tastes kind of terrible, but I'm really used to it, so I don't care. The flavored ones have a shit ton of sugar, albeit organic sugar. Sugar is sugar. And when I say a shit ton, I'm talking there's a lot of sugar in one bottle of the flavored. So if I make this from the dried herb, I'll just add a little bit of honey. I've talked about sourwood honey before. Some of the most beautiful parts of me taking the risk and relocating solo from one part of the East Coast to the other was I discovered that sourwood honey is one of the things that we just don't have in the North. And it is by far I was never a honey person, honestly. And I just fell in love with this honey. I'm on a super restricted diet, so the sourwood honey is like one of the additional things that I can do on occasion. But this does help with your dopamine levels. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. It is a brain neurotransmitter, and it is, the science behind it is like super intricate. You can listen to Dr. Amen. Dr. Amen, if you don't know who he is, he's this like little tiny, thin, bald man who is credentialed out the ass and has the only brain scans in the United States that can show things that would otherwise be undetected. So one of his most famous, I believe it was a TEDx talk, was him talking about his nephew who became violent. This was like a super peaceful, easygoing kid. And suddenly he became violent and angry, and he was like starting to hurt people, and the behavior was just not typical. And they put him in the brain scan, and then they found out there was something in one of the centers that was creating this. So we know from professional football players that movie Concussion was like insane, right? So eye-opening. Kind of glad that I didn't have sons and I didn't have to worry about that. But my oldest daughter did have 3 concussions. She was a phenomenal soccer player, and one of them was horrible. And to this day, I think she has a brain injury. I keep telling her all the time that she needs to do more things to balance her brain. Because those traumatic brain injuries are no joke. TBIs are no joke. Concussions can have detrimental effects and really screw things up. So Dr. Amen is like a warrior when it comes to that stuff. And then Huberman, Andrew Huberman, if you hop on his YouTube channel or Huberman Lab podcast, he goes into this all the time. He is a neurobiologist. Why can't I think? And his channel is sometimes a little bit over my head, but that's a good thing because it challenges my brain, and just chock full of nuts of wisdom. So dopamine is the things that we want. and then it's attached to our reward center. So we know in social media that when we get a thumbs up or a heart, it increases our dopamine, but it's like that false sense of satisfaction that almost leaves us depleted. And then it's like, well, why didn't they heart it? And they only gave it a thumbs up, and this person always hearts things, and now they're thumbs upping things, and you get like in your head about stupid shit like that. So dopamine helps with focus and concentration and having longevity in that. Although I do recommend watching Andrew Huberman's podcast on focus and concentration. If anyone's interested, I'll actually email you my PDF that I created for it was curriculum for a yoga retreat center. And I was working with young kids, and a lot of them had hardcore diagnoses, like mental health co-occurring disorders, and it was a lot of ADD and ADHD, and we know that dopamine is connected to that. And a lot of people with ADD and ADHD can have lower amounts of dopamine. Now, there are a ton of supplements that can increase dopamine. And, this is definitely one of them, caffeinated beverages. We do know that it does help with focus and concentration. There are a lot of kids who are being told that were diagnosed with ADD and ADHD to have coffee in the morning before school. Not a big fan of that. Not a big fan of all these kids ingesting massive amounts of coffee, because again, it's false energy. It's very taxing on our cortisol levels and our adrenal glands. No bueno. But rhodiola is actually probably one of the most revered herbs. It does help balance your cortisol levels. It does help with energy, does help with focus and concentration. It's by far my favorite. There are a few more. I guess Panax ginseng would be like my second recommendation, but really good stuff. I'm more of a fan of fostering neurotransmitters via different channels. But if you are trying to do all the right things, and only you know that, right? And struggling, I would go to rhodiola first and ginseng. I'm a little bit biased. I worked for Gaia Herbs. It is my most favorite herbal company. I loved working for them. I believe in their mission. They were one of the first companies that did full transparency. So you had the ability to research and look at all of their testing. They weren't hiding anything. And I really loved that about them. And I loved my experience working for them. And it's how I ended up in Brevard, North Carolina when I first moved here last year, because the farm is in Brevard and I fell in love with that area. So foods, chicken, almonds, eggs, fish, dark chocolate. And I think this is why I've been craving dark chocolate so much, because my dopamine levels have been low. And this is another interesting thing. So because I was in that wonky living situation, and now I'm trying to acclimate to a temporary situation while still finding permanent housing, I'm very much off my routine. And I will say that the earlier you rise and move your body, the better your brain is going to be. And this has definitely been a missing ingredient in my life. I used to get up and walk every morning. And I can be a very black and white person. I have to fight really hard to find the gray area. And in my warped head, there's no hills. There's not a lot of hills in Fletcher where I'm at. And I'm living off of a main road. And the early morning traffic is insane, and I'm not gonna walk in the dark and take the chance of being hit by a car. Now, I could drive to any trail and hike, but I don't wanna really be driving an hour to an hour and a half in the morning to go for a walk, and then I have my hour commute to work. So now I'm not walking. Dumb as shit. This is stuff that I struggle with. No one's perfect. We all have our thing. This is my thing. Where if I can't have it be the way I want it to be. I'm just not going to do it. And then I'm going to my health is going to start to suffer. How dumb is that? But this is humanity. Humanity is such a beautiful, magical thing. And then we're also dumb as shit at the same time. But that's why I love people, because we're just quirky. And I love that about us. So I'm gonna start to walk again. And that is a great way to increase your dopamine. I think what a lot of us are guilty of doing is waking up and right away looking at our phones. We're getting on our phones, we're getting on social media, we're getting those quick hits of dopamine, and it leaves us depleted. So if you can get outside, with that said, if you don't have time for a walk, if you don't have time to be outside for a long time, even just taking in the sunrise, whether the sun is out or not, research shows that it helps to balance your circadian rhythms. You could do this with the sunrise and the sunset. Again, whether it's a cloudy day or a sunny day, it doesn't matter. The sun is still doing its thing, and it will help with your dopamine levels. So I have been craving dark chocolate like a mofo, and I think it's because I've really been screwing up my dopamine levels. So I would go to food first, always. Get it through nutrition. So chicken, eggs, beans, what else did I say? Fish, and then salmon's such a great alternative because it's your essential fatty acids. You're going to get essential fatty acids from the almonds to an extent, that healthy fat. Dark chocolate is healthy fat. We know eggs is healthy fat. So yeah, those are foods that will help. Eating a lower carbohydrate, higher protein diet, I think this is why I thrive so much on a high protein diet, although I'm also a type O blood type, so we do really well with high protein, low carb. Type A blood type is the type that you do better on a more vegetarian-based diet. And so that higher protein really does help balance a lot of the neurotransmitters, not just dopamine. And then the next thing, of course, would be exercise. So any type of movement you're doing, it could be Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, martial arts. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't need to be HIIT training. It doesn't need to be endurance training. It just needs to be movement, period. So if for you, where you're at, if that's like a light, gentle walk, cool, great, get it done. Also being outside. In the articles that I was researching recently, because again, I know that, I'm struggling in this area. I think even just connection. I think we're all very starved for connection. And in the addiction world, in working in that field, connection is protection. That was always a really big motto. And it really is. There's strength in numbers. We know back in yesteryears, there was this idea of it takes a village, which I think is just a huge missing link in American culture. It really does take a village. And men very much had more masculine support around them. And I think women had the support that they needed through motherhood in a very unique way. Not to them unique, that was the way, but to us, it's like, oh my gosh, all the village women were mothering every single child in the village. So the child had multiple mothers. And what's interesting about that is I look back to being a single mom, and sometimes my feelings would get so hurt. And I remember doing this to my mother too, like, oh, Jenny's mom is so great. She's the best. And I always want to be at Jenny's house, and Jenny's mom this and Jenny's mom that. And, my youngest daughter, there was this woman, Holly, and Sarah adored this woman. And this went on for like a year. Holly could say nothing wrong. She could do nothing wrong. She was the coolest mom. She was the coolest woman. And my daughter was starting to go to Holly with her problems and not me. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, is this kid kidding me? And I was so hurt. And I mean, of course I got over it, and I moved through it in very specific ways. And I did research, and I understood that this was actually very good for a young girl to be looking for other role models. And it didn't just need to be me. And it was a very self-centered, selfish thing on my part, but I think it's a very human reaction and a very human motherly reaction to feel like you want to be number one, right? And then now I just understand that that's like kind of indigenous. It's in our DNA. It's very normal and healthy for our kids to seek out other parental figures, and especially with other women, because in ancient times, you know, back in the yesteryears of where I feel like sometimes I feel like I want to go back there. I know it was a hard life, but I'm like, I don't know, just not having social media, not having phones, having real connection, things just being less stressful in that way. But it's almost like my daughter understood, like, I need more women outside of my mother. And I think if you're a single dad watching this, be okay with that. Be okay with your kids seeking out external parental support and guidance. Don't be too jealous of that or afraid of that. You know, you're not the only voice that they need to hear from. You're not the only person that has good, healthy advice and guidance. Just make sure that those adults are healthy and well-intentioned and your kids are safe, of course. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but in this day and age, I think that you should. So I think that's one thing as far as dopamine, because I feel like if you're feeling connected, your reward centers are more satiated. And again, dopamine goes back to that, like, I want, I desire. And now we're living in a time where we really want the quick fixes, like, all the time. I mean, I get it. I think that's also like a societal standard now. We're not designed to live in this way, which is why I think our brains really have to fight for homeostasis and equilibrium a lot more than they used to. I also will say, to end this video, that what works for one isn't going to work for another. So maybe you don't need to go outside and move your body. Maybe you like those quieter, slower mornings, but maybe sitting outside and journaling would be a really good way to start to balance out your body and your mind, get your day headed in the right direction. For me, it's more about, like, what are you waking up and doing to get your mind and body and day headed in the right direction, because I think that sets the tone for everything else for sure. So I hope that this was helpful. I don't know why I end every video saying that, because I really just do want what I send out into the ethers to be helpful. But at the end of the day, it's either going to be helpful to you or it's not. I really don't have control over that, do I? Love you. Have a great day.